The smile was the part I was not prepared for. If she had looked away, if she had gone back inside and pretended it hadn't happened, I would have managed. I would have taken my coffee inside, closed the balcony door, and had a very serious conversation with myself about minding my own business. I had the whole speech ready. I never got to give it. Instead, she looked across the gap between our balconies, caught me staring, and smiled. Not a polite smile, not a punishing one. Just amused, like she had been expecting this for longer than I had. 20 minutes later, she knocked on my door. She was holding a small brown bottle of arnica oil and wearing the expression of someone who already knew how the next 10 minutes were going to go. "My back," she said. "I pulled something carrying samples up the stairs. I can't quite reach it myself." I stood there holding my coffee mug, trying to look like a man who had not, 20 minutes ago, been caught staring at her from across a balcony. "Of course," I said. She walked in like she had done it before. She hadn't. Neither of us mentioned the smile. We didn't need to. It was already in the room with us, taking up exactly as much space as it needed. That was the beginning. And I spent the better part of a year trying to work out the exact moment I stopped pretending it was anything else. My name is James Calloway. I'm 35, I'm an architect, and I have lived in apartment 6D of the Meridian building for 2 years with the quiet, low-maintenance life of a man who has decided the most interesting thing about his building is the structural issue with the south stairwell. I was wrong. The most interesting thing about the building turned out to be apartment 6E. Her name was Priya Anand. I knew it from the intercom panel and nowhere else, because we had never had a conversation. We had shared the elevator 3 times. Twice she had been carrying rolls of fabric, muted colors, draped over one arm. Once she had been on a call, speaking fast and low in the tone of someone for whom the call was important. I had looked at the elevator buttons. She had not appeared to notice I existed. She had lived next door for 6 months before the balcony incident. In that time I had established the following. She kept unusual hours. She had a collection of potted herbs she tended with genuine dedication. And she played music late on Thursday evenings, something instrumental, jazz or close to it, at a volume that came through the shared wall as a suggestion more than a sound. That was everything I knew about her. That and the smile, which was new. She handed me the arnica oil and sat sideways on the arm of my sofa, pulling her hair over one shoulder and reaching back to indicate a point between her shoulder blades where she had clearly done something that disagreed with her. She described it as a consequence of the elevator being out of service again. She described it without self-pity, the way competent people describe problems they have already decided to solve. I have poor judgment around women who treat their own discomfort as a logistical problem rather than a crisis. This is a known weakness. I have addressed it not at all. I applied the oil. She said thank you in the tone of someone who means it, without wanting to perform it. She stood, rolled her shoulder once to test it, and turned around. "You're the one on the balcony," she said. "I am. I've seen you out there most mornings. It's a habit. A good one." She looked at me for a moment. "Priya. James." She glanced at the architectural drawings spread across my table. At the bookshelf, at the drafting tools arranged with the particular order of someone who reaches for them constantly. "Tea," I said, because apparently that was what I was doing now. "Yes," she said. She stayed an hour. We talked about the building, the elevator, which had been unreliable since before either of us moved in, the management company, which communicated through an automated email system that communicated with nobody, because the inbox was unmonitored. She had been trying to report a leak under her kitchen sink for 3 weeks. She had documented it in photographs. She showed me 3 of them on her phone. They were remarkably well composed for photographs of a failing pipe. "You framed the leak," I said. She looked at the photos, then at me. "I'm a textile designer," she said, as though this explained everything about her, which it mostly did. "I cannot help it," I laughed. It came out before I could make a decision about it. She looked satisfied by this in a way she made no effort to conceal. She left when her tea was finished, took the arnica with her, did not suggest we do this again. I washed the mugs, put them back, stood in my kitchen for a moment looking at the cabinet door, which was not interesting, but was neutral. And neutral seemed like the right register for what I was feeling, which I was also choosing not to examine. On the balcony, her herbs were moving in the afternoon light. Rosemary in the corner, a small clay pot of something I couldn't name from across the gap. All of it alive and well attended. I did not read anything into this. I was an architect. I observed things. It was occupational. She knocked again 11 days later about the sink. Not because she needed me specifically, but because the management company had finally asked if a neighbor could confirm the leak was affecting shared infrastructure. I confirmed it. The plumber came 4 days after that. She texted me when it was resolved. It was the first text she had ever sent me, and it said, "Fixed." The plumber said the pipe was original to the building. 1987. Impressive it lasted this long. I wrote back, "The building has structural opinions." She replied with a single period, not a dismissal. More like, "Yes, exactly, agreed, let's move on." I spent longer than I should have working out the difference. This is not my proudest admission. After the sink, things shifted slightly, not dramatically, not in any way I could point to clearly, but she started saying hello in the hallway with the quality of someone who had decided I was a specific person to her rather than a general obstacle. She asked about the project under my arm one morning, a roll of site plans, and listened to my answer with the focused attention of someone genuinely interested. She told me about the textile collection she was working on that season. "Earthy reds," she said, "the colors of old brick." She said this while looking at the Meridian's facade through the lobby glass, and I understood she was seeing it as color rather than structure, and that this was simply how she moved through the world. I began paying attention to things I had no particular reason to track. Whether her light was on when I got home late, whether the Thursday jazz was there or not. The afternoon she arrived with a small olive tree in a terracotta pot and spent 20 minutes finding the right spot for it on the balcony. Not because I was watching. I want to be clear about that. I was on my balcony with coffee, as was my habit. I have presented weaker arguments than this. None of them were convincing either. The evening that changed things was a Thursday in November. Cold in the way that makes old buildings smell like radiator dust and something older underneath it. Her music was on, which meant she was home, and I had run out of coffee at the precise moment I most needed it, which is a domestic failure I have never corrected. I knocked on 6E. She answered with a pencil behind her ear and a look of mild surprise that shifted into something else quite quickly. "Coffee," I said. "I've run out. I'll replace it tomorrow." She stepped back from the door. I came in. Her apartment was the mirror image of mine in layout, and almost nothing else. Where mine had drawings and scale models and the ordered surfaces of someone who thinks in lines, hers had color everywhere. Fabric swatches pinned to a corkboard that covered most of one wall. A long work table scattered with thread samples, stacks of reference books bristling with paper slips. Prints on the walls, 3 more herbs on the kitchen windowsill. The whole place smelled like cardamom and warm fabric, and something I couldn't name that was specific to her. She made coffee while I stood at the work table and looked at what was spread across it. A series of fabric samples in the brick reds she had mentioned, arranged in sequence from pale terracotta to something close to rust. 8 swatches in total, each one subtly different from the one beside it. "What's this for?" I said. "Upholstery collection, high-end residential. The client wants colors that feel like they were always there, not new, just already present." She handed me the coffee without asking how I took it. "Black. I took it black. I said nothing about this." "Colors with a history. Colors with a history," I repeated. "Yes." She pointed at me once, just briefly. "Exactly that." She showed me the rest of the collection then, not because I asked, but because she had been alone with it all evening and needed another set of eyes that would understand why the gap between the 3rd and 4th swatch mattered and was not arbitrary. I looked at them carefully. I told her what I saw in each one. She listened with the focused attention she had given my site plans, then picked up the 3rd swatch, held it against the 4th, and was quiet for a moment. "The 4th one is right," she said. I knew it was. I just needed to hear it from someone who wasn't me. I understood this completely. It is the same thing I do with structural drawings. You know the answer. You need another person's eyes to confirm that you know it. We talked until nearly midnight. About the collection. About a building I was currently restoring in the east of the city. About the particular problem of designing spaces for how people actually live in them, rather than how they're supposed to. She had opinions about this, strong ones, from the textile side of it, about how color and texture change the way a body feels in a room. She said the word body the way designers say it, meaning something precise and physical and completely unsentimental, and I found myself paying very close attention. I left with a bag of her coffee grounds and the awareness that something had shifted in my understanding of the apartment next door, though I couldn't have named precisely what. I left a fresh bag of coffee outside her door the next morning with a note: "Structural opinions correctly applied to upholstery." The 4th swatch. She texted me a period. I had gotten significantly better at reading periods. December was colder than it had any right to be. She started leaving small things at my door without explanation. A cutting from one of her herbs. The basil was getting too big, the note said. Nothing else. A paperback she had finished, tucked against the doorframe. No note at all. Once, a small swatch of fabric in a deep red, folded into a square, which I kept on the drafting table without quite knowing why, except that the color was exactly right against the gray of the blueprints. I started noticing when she was home and when she wasn't. Not in a way I was proud of, just the particular awareness of someone who has become a fixed point in your landscape. The faint sound of the Thursday music. Whether her coat was on the hook through the small gap when she left the door ajar. The way her kitchen light cast a different color than mine, into the corridor in the evenings. I did not tell myself this was anything. I was very good at not telling myself things. There was a weekend in early December when the building lost hot water for 36 hours, and neither of us had anywhere else to be. She knocked at noon on the first day to confirm it wasn't just her, and by 2 o'clock we had established a sort of command center at my kitchen table, both of us working, her with fabric samples and a sketch pad, me with site plans, the radio on low, takeout ordered and eaten, and the containers cleared without either of us suggesting we should probably go back to our own apartments. At some point she fell asleep at the table. Not dramatically. She just stopped moving, her head resting on her arm, the sketch pad still open in front of her. I worked for another hour. Then I found a blanket, set it over her shoulders quietly, and moved to the sofa with my plans and a cup of cold coffee. I told myself I was simply being practical. Hot water or no hot water, she was comfortable, and waking her would have been unnecessary. I was very talented at telling myself things that had nothing to do with what was actually happening. She woke at dusk, looked at the blanket, then at me on the sofa, and was quiet for a moment. "You let me sleep," she said. "You were working hard." She looked at her sketch pad, then at me. Something in her face was different, softer, or maybe just less guarded, the way people look when they have been asleep in a place and woken up to find it still safe. "Thank you," she said, and meant it in a register that had nothing to do with the blanket. That is the moment, when I look back. Not the wine in December, not the balcony smile. It was the blanket, and the quiet hour on the sofa, and the way she looked at me when she woke up and understood that I had simply let her rest. Everything after that was just the two of us catching up to something that had already decided. January arrived without much ceremony. The hot water came back. The routines came back with it, but something had shifted in the texture of them. The way a room looks the same and feels completely different once you have rearranged one piece of furniture. She knocked more easily now, not always with a reason. Sometimes with a reason that was clearly not the actual reason, a question about the building's heating system, which she could have asked the super, or a book she wanted to return that could have waited. I opened the door each time. I did not point out that the reasons were thin. Thin reasons are sometimes the bravest kind. I started cooking more deliberately on evenings I thought she might come by. Not elaborate, just better than I would have made for myself alone. This is the kind of thing you notice about yourself and don't examine directly. The way you don't look at a light source when you're trying to see clearly in the dark. She brought her sketch pad one evening and worked at my kitchen table while I went over structural notes for the restoration project. We did not talk much. We did not need to. There is a particular kind of quiet you can only have with someone once you have stopped performing ease and started actually feeling it, and we had arrived there without discussing how. She looked up once and caught me looking at her. I did not look away. Neither did she. "What?" she said. "Nothing," I said. She looked at me for another moment. Then she went back to her sketch pad. But the corner of her mouth moved slightly, just slightly, in the way it did when she was keeping something to herself. I have poor survival instincts around women who keep things to themselves in that particular way. I have mentioned this. I was not exaggerating. She knocked one evening with a bottle of wine and no explanation, and I opened the door and took the bottle and we drank it at my kitchen table while she talked about her family, who were far away, and the particular feeling of that distance in winter. "Not grief," she said, "just a texture. Something you move through rather than around." I told her about my sister, who called every Sunday, and how I had started scheduling things on Sunday afternoons to make the call feel less like an obligation and more like a decision I'd made. She looked at me for a moment. "I do the same thing," she said. "I know," I said. "Then, I thought you might." She was quiet for a moment. Her thumb moved once across the stem of her glass. She was looking at the table, then at me. "You're easy to be around," she said. Directly, the way she said most things. "So are you," I said. She held my gaze for 1 second longer than felt entirely safe. Then she looked at her wine. "I should go," she said. "You don't have to." She looked up. Something changed in her face. Not surprise exactly, but the expression of someone who has just received confirmation of something they had been testing without naming it as a test. Her fingers went still. "James," she said. "Priya," she laughed once. Low and quiet and real. Then she set her glass down and looked at me properly, not the evaluating look she sometimes had, but the other one. The one I recognized from the balcony. That morning, she said, when you were staring, I remember. I had been watching you for 2 weeks before that, she said. I want to be clear about who was staring first. That landed somewhere I hadn't expected. I didn't know that, I said. I know you didn't. Said in the tone of something she had been carrying for a while and had decided it was safe to set down. I was waiting to see if you were going to say something. You never did. I didn't know there was something to say. There was, she said. There has been. For months. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers, gently, nothing assumed. She looked down at it. Then she turned her hand over and held it, and that was the end of one thing and the beginning of something else entirely. She looked up at me, and there it was, the same smile from the balcony. Not polite, not punishing. Certain, I knew, she said, that you were going to be a problem. You knocked on my door, I said. I knocked because of my back, she said. I stayed because of you. 3 months later, she reorganized my bookshelf while I was on a site visit. She arranged it by color, which is the only system that makes sense to her and no sense at all to me. She left a note explaining the logic. I hated the system. I have not changed it. 6 months after that, the olive tree on her balcony had a companion. One I had chosen at a garden center on a Saturday while she held the terracotta pot, and I pretended to have opinions about soil. Both trees live on their respective balconies now, one on each side, visible from each other across the gap. Nothing important had appeared overnight. It had been there for months, in the Thursday music through the wall and the single periods at the end of text messages, and the smile that didn't look away. It had simply needed someone to stop pretending they couldn't see it. Years later, when people ask how it started, she tells them about the balcony, about deciding to smile instead of looking away, about knowing immediately, when she walked into an apartment full of architectural drawings, that she was going to be back. She says she always knew. I tell people I had absolutely no idea. She corrects me every single time. You knew, she says. You were just being very polite about it. I have stopped arguing this. She is right about most things. This appears to be one of them. What would you have done if someone caught you staring and smiled back instead of looking away? And have you ever found out that someone had been paying attention to you long before you thought to pay attention back? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.